So we started with chapter 1 on Friday. However, we didn't get too far. So we're going to pick up there again today. Playing Pilgrim. Christmas won't be Christmas without any presents, grumbled Joe, lying on the rug. It's so dreadful to be poor, said Meg, looking down at her old dress. I don't think it's fair for some girls to have plenty of pretty things and other girls nothing at all, added little Amy with an injured sniff. Well, we've got father and mother and each other, said Beth, contentedly from her corner. What does contentedly mean, Micah? Yeah, at the bottom of the page it says with a calm, quiet feeling of comfort or satisfaction. Who's the only one who's satisfied with Christmas this year? Layla? Beth. All of the other girls are a little bummed because they're poor this year. They may not get a whole lot of presents. Oh, where was I? The four young faces brightened at the cheerful words, but darkened again as Joe said sadly, We haven't got father, and shall not have him for a long time. Each girl silently added, perhaps never, thinking of father far away where the fighting was. Why won't they have father this year? Edgar? Because he's off fighting in the war and they're afraid he might die, which is a possibility. Nobody spoke for a minute. Then Meg said, Mother thinks we ought not to spend money for presents when our men are suffering so in the army. We can't do much, but we can make our little sacrifices, and we ought to do it gladly. But I'm afraid that I don't do that, said Meg regretfully, as she thought of all the pretty things she wanted. But I don't think the dollar we've each got to spend would do the army much good. What does Meg suggest they do with the money they do have? Aiden? That's what Meg suggests? But what does Joe suggest? Well, she's about to suggest it. I agree not to expect anything from Mother or you, but I do want to buy Undinen Sintram for myself. I've wanted it for so long, said Joe, who was a bookworm. I plan to spend mine in new music, said Beth, with a little sigh which no one heard. I was going to buy a nice box of drawing pencils. I really need them, said Amy decidedly. Mother won't wish for us to give up everything. Let's each buy what we want and have a little fun. I'm sure we work hard enough to earn it, cried Joe. I know I do, teaching those tiresome children nearly all day, began Meg in the complaining tone again. Oh, you don't have half as hard a time as I do, said Joe. How would you like to be shut up for hours with a fussy old lady who is never satisfied and worries you till you're ready to fly out of the window? What is Joe's job? What does Joe do for money or do for a living? Layla? Mm-hmm. She takes care of an old lady. What does Meg do? What's Meg's job? Chloe? She teaches tiresome children all day. Oh. Relatable. It's naughty to fret. It's naughty to fret, but I do think washing dishes and keeping things tidy is the worst work in the world. My hands get so stiff that I can't practice well at all. Beth looked at her rough hands with a sigh that anyone could hear that time. What is Beth's job? Aiden? Dishes. She is old enough to be out of school at this time in history. They graduated a lot earlier than we do. But her job, she wasn't necessarily out and working in the world yet. She was staying at home taking care of the house. Because Marmee, the mom, has to go out and work because the father is away at war. She has to go and make the money, so Beth takes care of the house. I don't believe any of you suffer as badly as I do, said Amy. For you don't have to go to school with girls who laugh at your dresses and label your father if he isn't rich and insult you when your nose isn't nice. If you mean libel, then say so. And don't talk about label as if Papa was a pickle bottle, advised Joe, laughing. What does libel mean? Not what Amy said. Amy said label, but what is libel? Chloe?
It means to say someone is like mean or something when they're not.
Good. It's at the bottom of the page. It says to make a false written or spoken statement that damages someone's reputation. So basically, to talk bad about someone. Now, here's something you have to know about Amy. Amy loves all the finer things of life, and she tries to sound fancy or knowledgeable. But oftentimes, the fancy words she tried to use are the wrong words. So instead of saying, the girls at school libel father, like, oh, they make fun of him and try to damage his reputation, she says, oh, the girls at school label father. And they're all like, I think you mean libel, because label doesn't make any sense. Well, you needn't be satirical about it. It's proper to use good words and improve your vocabulary, returned Amy with dignity. Oh, don't peck at one another, children. Don't you wish we had the money Papa lost when we were little, Joe? Oh, dear me, how happy we'd be, said Meg, who could remember better times. You said the other day you thought we were a good deal happier than the King children, for they were fighting and fretting all the time, in spite of their money. So I did, Beth. Well, I think we are. For though we do have to work, we're a pretty jolly set, as Joe would say. Okay, so the girls were discussing, man, don't you remember what it was like when we used to have money and we were rich and we had all these things that we don't have now? And Beth, who is usually the one to remind them of the truth, says, guys, we may not have lots of money, but at least we have a happy family and we're all healthy and we have each other. And Meg's like, yeah, you're right. Joe does use such slang words, observed Amy, with a reproving look at the long figure stretched out on the rug. Joe immediately sat up and began to whistle. Oh, don't, Joe. It's so boyish. Well, that's why I do it. I detest rude, unladylike girls. Well, I hate affected, niminy-piminy chicks. Okay, you have to understand, Joe is the tomboy of the four girls. Okay, she does not want to be a proper lady at all. Okay, back then it was considered a little, it was considered not great manners, more like a boyish thing to do, to be walking around whistling a tune like you were working out in the yard or something. Okay, Joe loves to whistle. Joe also loves to sit on the floor. Joe also loves to run around. Okay, all the while wearing her dress because she's required to wear a dress as a lady. Okay, so all throughout her life and all throughout the book, you'll see Joe gets criticized by her sisters, and they're constantly telling her, Joe, you've got to be a lady. You have to act proper. You have to dress proper. You're becoming a grown adult. It's time for you to kind of outgrow these childish ways. And Joe just does not want to by any means. If Joe had it her way, she'd be a boy fighting in the army. Okay, she does not want to be a girly girl. So Amy, who loves being prim and proper and fancy, she says, oh, don't, Joe. It's so boyish. Well, that's why I do it. I detest rude, unladylike girls. Well, I hate affected, niminy-piminy chits. Okay, so Joe and Amy are kind of like fighting back and forth. Ian?
This is also why she hates going to take care of the old woman, because that old woman is trying to tell her how to get rich by marrying some rich dude.
Correct.
And she wants to.
Correct. Birds in their affected little nests agree, sang Beth, the peacemaker, with such a funny face that both sharp voices softened to a laugh. Okay, so Beth is always the one who's like, guys, listen, calm down. Okay, it's okay. There's no need for us to be fighting amongst each other. We're just gonna keep on going. Layla, what's the matter? What did I say? Oh yeah, birds in their little nests agree. You're right. Birds in their little nests agree. Really, girls, you're both to be blamed, said Meg, beginning to lecture in her elderly sister fashion. Margaret, the oldest of the four sisters, was 16 and very pretty, being plump and fair, with large eyes, plenty of soft brown hair, a sweet mouth, and white hands, of which she was rather vain. Okay, someone read the definition for vain at the bottom of the page. This is very important for Meg. Riley?
Excessively proud of one's appearance or
Very good. Okay, so Meg is always wanting to look like she's got it all together. Okay, she's very concerned with how other people think of her. She wants to be considered a very fancy and proper woman in society, all these things. Okay? You are old enough to leave off boyish tricks, Josephine. It didn't matter so much when you were a little girl, but now you are so tall and turn up your hair, you should remember that you are a young lady. I am not. And if turning up my hair makes me one, well, then I'll wear it in two tails until I'm 20, cried Jo, pulling off her net and shaking down a chestnut mane. Okay, so basically one sign of being a proper lady was to have your hair all pinned up properly and curled and looking nice and fancy. Okay, well, Jo would just rather walk around with her hair in a ponytail all the time. That's what she's saying. I am not a young lady, and if having my hair up makes me be one, well, then I'll just pull it down and wear it down until I'm 20, till I'm 50 or whatever she said. 15-year-old Jo was very tall, thin, and brown, and reminded one of a colt, which is like a young horse. For her long limbs were very much in her way. She had a decided mouth, a comical nose, and sharp gray eyes, which appeared to see everything. Her long, thick hair was her one beauty, but it was usually bundled up into a net to be out of her way. She had big hands and feet, a flyaway look to her clothes, and the uncomfortable appearance of a girl who was rapidly shooting up into a woman and didn't like it. Okay, so Jo's the one who looks like she just rolled out of bed, didn't brush her hair, has like her pants on backwards, her shirt's inside out, only one button's done, the rest was hanging out, has one sock on, one sock off. Like she's just kind of a mess all the time. Okay, because she's not at all concerned about how she looks. All she wants to do is get outside and run around and play. That's all she wants to do, or read a book. Guys, I'm not going to stop much because it's going to take us forever if we don't. Okay. If you have a serious question, just write it down and we'll get to it in a little bit. I hate to think I've got to grow up and be Miss March and wear long gowns and look prim. It's bad enough to be a girl anyway when I like boys' games and work and manners. And it's worse than ever now, for I'm dying to go and fight with Papa. And I can only stay home and knit like an old woman. And Jo shook the blue army sock she was knitting till the needles rattled like castanets, and her ball bounded across the room. Poor Jo. It's too bad, but it can't be helped. So you must try to be contented with making your name boyish and playing brother to us girls, said Beth, stroking the rough head with a hand that all the dishwashing and dusting in the world could not make ungentle in its touch. Okay, so now we're going to learn about Beth. Elizabeth, or Beth, as everyone called her, was a rosy, smooth-haired, bright-eyed girl of 13. She had a shy manner, a timid voice, and a peaceful expression which was seldom disturbed. Her father called her Little Miss Tranquility. What does tranquility mean? Layla? Good. So while Jo is the train wreck, basically, Beth is the calm, peaceful one. She is the one always solving the fight between the sisters. Okay, she's quiet, she's reserved, she's shy, she never causes problems. She's just a sweet little princess, basically. And the name suited her excellently, for she seemed to live in a happy world of her own, only venturing out to meet the few whom she trusted and loved. Okay, those are from today. If you can put them on today's pod, I think it's 1 point. So if they have it turned in, just go through and put 1 point for each of them.
This one's just a completion.
As for you, Amy, continued Meg, you are altogether too particular and prim. You'll grow up like an affected little goose if you don't take care. I like your nice manners and your refined ways of speaking, but your absurd words are as bad as Joe's slang. Amy, although she was the youngest, was a most important person. Well, in her own opinion, at least. A regular snow maiden with blue eyes and yellow hair curling on her shoulders, pale and slender, she always carried herself like a young lady mindful of her manners. Well, if Joe is a tomboy and Amy's a goose, what am I, please? Asked Beth, ready to share the lecture. Okay, so this is a good idea of who Beth is, all right? Meg has just finished getting Joe in trouble for how she was acting, getting Amy in trouble for how she was acting, and Beth says, "Oh, what am I doing wrong? What can I fix? What part of the lecture is my part? What am I doing?" And Meg says, "Well, you're a dear and nothing else," answered Meg, and no one contradicted her, for the mouse was the pet of the family. Who is the mouse of the family? Like the family's favorite child. Manny? Beth. No, she doesn't ever do anything wrong. She never gets in trouble. Okay? She's always sweet. As an example, she asks what she can fix to be better, and they're like, "Nothing. You're great, just the way you are. You don't have any problems." The four sisters sat knitting away in the twilight, while the December snow fell quietly without, and the fire crackled cheerfully within. It's right around Christmas time. It was a comfortable room, though the carpet was faded and the furniture very plain, for a good picture or two hung on the walls. Books filled the recesses, chrysanthemums, which are flowers, and Christmas roses bloomed in the windows, and a pleasant atmosphere of home peace pervaded it. So a very kind of cozy home. I think it's really cold outside with the fires going inside. It's just very cute and warm and friendly in there. The clock all of a sudden struck 6, and everyone brightened, for Mother was coming home. Having swept up the hearth, Beth put a pair of slippers down by the fire to warm. "These slippers are quite worn out. Marmee must have a new pair." "I thought I would get her some with my dollar," said Beth. Okay, pause. Remember how the girls had just finished discussing that they weren't going to spend their dollar on themselves, they would spend the dollar they had on someone else for Christmas? Beth was going to spend her dollar on getting Mom a new pair of slippers. Now, keep in mind, $1 back then was worth a lot more than $1 is today. Okay? You actually probably could buy a pair of slippers with $1 back then. Okay? So Beth said, "Yeah, I thought I'd get her a new pair with my dollar for Christmas." "No, I shall!" cried Amy. "I'm the oldest," began Meg, but Joe cut in with a decided tone. "Well, I'm the man of the family now that Papa is away, and I shall provide the slippers, for he told me to take special care of Mother while he was gone." "Okay, I'll tell you what we'll do," said Beth. "Let's each get her something for Christmas, and not get anything for ourselves." "Oh, that's just like you, dear. What are we going to get?" exclaimed Joe. Everyone thought for a minute, and then Meg announced, as if the idea was suggested by the sight of her own pretty hands, "Oh, I shall give her a nice pair of gloves." "Army shoes, best to be had," cried Joe. "Some handkerchiefs, all hemmed," said Beth. "Oh, I'll get her a little bottle of cologne, like perfume. She likes it, and it won't cost that much, so then I'll have some left by my own pencil," added Amy. Okay, how is that? What does that show you about Amy? Connor? She's a little bit selfish. Yeah, sure. I'll get Mom a little thing, but then I'll still have some left for me. Everybody else is going to spend their whole dollar on Mom. Brian?
When I was in Ireland, 100 cents is not worth that much at all.
Mm-hmm.
So they use euros, and they're worth like $1. So a dollar, like I'm pretty sure a euro is worth like $1.
Uh-huh.
Sort of. If you're in Ireland. But euros are actually more money.
Okay. We must go shopping downtown tomorrow afternoon, Meg, said Jo, marching up and down with her hands behind her back and her nose in the air. There is so much to do about the play for Christmas night. I don't mean to act any more after this time. I'm getting too old for such things, observed Meg, who was as much a child as ever about dressing up frolics. Okay, so you also have to understand that every year the girls put on like a very amateur play for their friends and neighbors and things for Christmas. Okay, Jo usually writes the play and then the girls act it out. And Meg said, "I'm getting too old. This is gonna be my last year performing in the play. I'm getting a little too old to act like a child and act on these plays. It's just not for me anymore." Oh, you won't stop, I know. As long as you can trail around in a white gown with your hair down and wear gold paper jewelry, you're the best actress we've got. And there'll be an end of everything if you quit, said Jo. We have to rehearse tonight. Come here, Amy, and do that fainting scene, for you're as stiff as a poker in that. Okay, you know what a poker is? A poker is like a long metal thing you use to poke the fire, right? To make sure you don't get burnt. Okay? If you drop a poker, it falls like this, right? Correct? Okay. Well, when someone faints, do they faint just like this? Like fall over like that? No. Generally, they fall kind of like a rag doll, right? Like all their muscles kind of go limp and they fall kind of like this, right? It's much more realistic that way. Well, Amy's fainting is as stiff as a poker, so she needs to practice her fainting because nobody faints like this. Okay? Well, I can't help it. I never saw anyone faint, and I don't choose to make myself all black and blue with bruises like you do. If I can go down easily, I'll drop. If I can't, I shall fall into a chair and be graceful. I don't care if Hugo does come at me with a pistol, returned Amy, who was not gifted with dramatic power, but was chosen because she was small enough to be carried out, shrieking by the villain of the piece. Okay, I'll show you. Do it this way. Clasp your hands and sew and stagger across the room, crying frantically, Rodrigo, save me! Save me! And away went Jo with a melodramatic scream, which was truly thrilling. Amy followed, but she poked her hands out stiffly before her and jerked herself along as if she went by machinery, and her ow was more suggestive of pins being run into her than of fear and anguish. So instead of like, oh, it was like a, oh. Okay, she's not a great actress. Jo gave a despairing groan. Ugh, it's no use. Just do the best you can when the time comes. And if the audience laughs, don't blame me. Well, I don't see how you can write and act such splendid things, Jo. You're a regular Shakespeare, exclaimed Beth. Meh, not quite, replied Jo modestly. But I do think The Witch's Curse, an operatic tragedy, is rather a nice thing. Hello, dearies! How have you got on today? Said a cheery voice at the door, and actors and audience turned to welcome a tall, motherly lady. She was not elegantly dressed, but a noble-looking woman, and the girls thought the gray cloak and unfashionable bonnet covered the most splendid mother in the whole world. There was so much to do today that I didn't come home to dinner. Has anyone called Beth? Oh, how is your cold, Meg? Ooh, Jo, you look tired to death. Come and kiss me, baby. While making these motherly inquiries, Mrs. March got her wet things off and her warm slippers on. Sitting down in the easy chair, she drew Amy to her lap, preparing to enjoy the happiest hour of her busy day. The girls flew about, trying to make things comfortable, each in her own way. Meg arranged the tea table, as Jo brought in the wood and set chairs, dropping, overturning, and clattering everything she touched in the process. Beth trotted to and fro between parlor and kitchen, quiet and busy, while Amy gave directions to everyone, as she sat with her hands folded. Yeah, everyone else was working except for Amy. Oh, yeah, go and do this. Yeah, okay, you do this. You do this. You do this. never said anything. As they gathered about the table, Mrs. March said with a particularly happy face, "I've got a treat for you after supper. Are you okay?" "I've got a treat for you after supper." A quick, bright smile went around like a streak of sunshine. Beth clapped her hands, and Joe tossed up her napkin, crying, "A letter! A letter! 3 cheers for father!" Okay, so the only time they ever got to hear from their father was if he wrote them a letter. And it took a very, very long time for the letter to get to them. So getting a letter from their father was like, first of all, proof that he was still alive. Second of all, they were going to hear how he was doing. So it was a really big deal. Yes, a nice long letter. He is well and sends all sorts of loving wishes for Christmas and a special message to you girls, said Mrs. March, patting her pocket as if she had a treasure there. "When will he come home, Marmee?" asked Beth, with a little quiver in her voice. Just so you know, it's kind of a southernish term, but they call their mom Marmee. That's what they call her. It's kind of like calling mom or mother or mommy or something like that. "Oh, not for many months, dear, unless he is sick. He will stay and do his work faithfully as long as he can, and we won't ask for him back a minute sooner than he can be spared. Now, come and hear the letter." "Oh, hurry and get done! Don't stop to smile over your plate, Amy!" cried Joe, choking on her tea and dropping her bread butter side down on the carpet in her haste to get at the treat. Beth ate no more, but crept away to sit in her shadowy corner and think about the delight to come until the others were ready. "I think it was so splendid of father to go as a chaplain when he was too old to be drafted and not strong enough to be a soldier," said Meg warmly. Okay, this is important to know. Why does their father not go into the army as a soldier? Layla? He's too old. He's not that it's like an insult, but he is too old to, like, if he were to go and fight the way that the soldiers fight, it would kill him. He doesn't have the strength to do that. So he very well could have stayed home and not he didn't have to go to the army. But he went anyway as a chaplain, which is like a pastor for the army. Okay? He went to go and kind of lead the soldiers in devotions and pray for them and things like that. So he still chose to sacrifice being home with his family and potentially be in danger to go and help the army, even though he couldn't help them in the battle. That was the kind of man Mr. March was. Great question. Yeah. So it'd be out of 16. So this is the key. All you need to check is make sure they put the right box. Don't worry about the explanation. Okay. So the right object, basically. And then the last page, and then that one. But in the last page is just making sure they have the answer. What was I gonna say? Okay, so Mr. March is a very giving man, obviously, and he has chosen to potentially give his life even though he didn't have to. Okay? Yes.
So, again, like, so, the dad was too old to fight the army, but still.
Correct. So, but in this case, he did go, just not as a soldier. Okay, last one. Sophie. Who? Mr. March? A chaplain? A chaplain is like a priest or a pastor in the army. So typically they go and they encourage the soldiers, they share scripture with them, they pray for them if they have something they need to be prayed for, things like that. It will also be her aunt here. But they haven't told us that yet. No, because we skipped on theirs we crossed off I think 10 or 12. They should have it marked off on there. Okay. Okay. Oh, all right. This is Joe. Oh, don't I wish I could go as a drummer, a vivin. What's its name? Or a nurse, so I could be near him and help him, exclaimed Joe with a groan. Yeah, it must be very disagreeable to sleep in a tent and eat all sorts of bad tasting things and drink out of a tin mug, said Amy. They all drew to the fire, Mother in the big chair with Beth at her feet, Meg and Amy perched on either arm of the chair, and Joe leaning on the back, where no one could see any sign of emotion if the letter should happen to be touching. Very few letters were written in those hard times that were not touching, especially those which fathers sent home. In this one, little was said of the hardships endured, the dangers he faced, or the homesickness he conquered. It was a cheerful, hopeful letter, full of lively descriptions of camp life, marches, and military news, and only at the end did the writer's heart overflow with fatherly love and longing for his little girls at home. This is what the father said in his letter. Give them all of my dear love and a kiss. Tell them I think of them by day and pray for them by night. A year seems so very long to wait before I can see them, but remind them that these hard days need not be wasted. I know that they will be loving children and will do their duty faithfully and improve themselves so beautifully that when I come back to see them, I may be fonder and prouder than ever of my little women. Everybody sniffed when they came to that part. A great tear dropped off the end of Joe's nose, and Amy hid her face on her mother's shoulder, sobbing out, I'm a selfish girl, but I'll truly try to be better so that he won't be disappointed in me. We all will, cried Meg. I think too much of my looks and hate to work, but I won't anymore if I can help it. I'll try and be what he loves to call me, a little woman, and not be rough and wild, said Joe, thinking that keeping her temper at home was a much harder task than facing a rebel or two down south. So this is kind of Joe's thinking it would be a lot easier for me to fight in the battle than it would be for me to control my temper. Sometimes it's true. Beth said nothing but wiped away her tears and began to knit with all her might, losing no time in doing her duty. She resolved in her quiet little soul to be all that father hoped her to be by the time he returned home. Do you see why all the girls are trying to be as good as they can? Okay? They're trying to give their absolute best effort to be the best daughter they possibly can so that their father will be proud of them. Mrs. March broke the silence that followed Joe's words by saying in her cheery voice, do you remember how you used to play Pilgrim's Progress when you were little things? When you were little girls? Nothing delighted you more than to have me tie bundles on your backs for burden, give you hats and sticks and rolls of paper, and let you travel through the house from the cellar, the basement, which was the city of destruction, up, up, up to the very housetop, where you had all the lovely things you could collect to make a celestial city. Yeah, what fun it was, especially going by the lions and fighting Apollyon, and passing through the valley where the hobgoblins were, said Joe. So do you get what they're saying here? When they were little, they played they played Pilgrim's Progress, like they were the ones traveling through all these obstacles. Okay. I don't remember much about it except that I was afraid of the cellar, and I always liked the cake and milk we had when we got to the top. If I wasn't too old for such things, I'd rather like to play it over again, said Amy, who began to talk of renouncing childish things at the mature age of 12. Oh, we are never too old for this, my dear. It is a play we are playing all the time, in one way or another. Our burdens are here, our road is before us, and the search for goodness and happiness leads us through many troubles and mistakes to the peace of the celestial city. Now, my little pilgrims, suppose you begin to play again, not in play, but in earnest, and see how far you can get before father comes home. Really, Mother? Where are our bundles? Asked Amy, who was very literal. Each of you told what your burden was just now, except for Beth. I rather think she hasn't got any, said Mother. Okay, what does each girl's bundle represent? Do they literally have a physical pack tied on their backs? No. When they were little girls, they did. But now that they're going to play again as adults, what's going to represent their bundle? Yes. The things they struggle with. So, for example, for Meg, her struggle is not wanting the riches they had when she was younger, right? That's what she talks about. That and having to work, which she doesn't like to do. Okay? That's her bundle that she has to carry through life and carry it well. It's a burden, right? So a responsibility she has to bear. What is Joe's burden that she has to carry but doesn't want to? Jacob? To hold back her anger. There's also another one. Layla? She has to spend time with the grumpy old lady. There's another one. Something she's supposed to be doing, but she hates it. Ian?
She's like, I guess I have to be a little.
I guess I have to grow up and be a little less boyish. I'll try to be a little more ladylike. Okay? Now, what is Amy's burden? Micah? Yes, being selfish. What is Beth's burden? Trick question. She hasn't said it yet. Seems like she's perfect and doesn't have one. Well, here she steps up. Oh, yes, I have mine, Mother. Mine is dishes and dusters and everything and envying girls with nice pianos and being afraid of people. Okay? Beth was so afraid of talking to people that she would almost be rude. Okay? To the point where, not intentionally, but it would be like if someone came over to their house for dinner and they said, "Hi, Beth, nice to meet you." She would be so afraid she'd run away, which is kind of rude. You want to welcome your guest. Okay? So that's kind of one of her burdens as well. Being too shy, basically. Beth's bundle was such a funny one that everybody wanted to laugh, but nobody did, for it would have hurt her feelings very much. You know what? Let's do it, said Meg thoughtfully. It's only another name for trying to be good, and the story might help us. For it's hard work, and we forget, and don't do our best. Oh, we ought to have a guidebook like Christian did. What should we do about that? Asked Joe, delighted with this little game, which lent a little romance to the very dull task of doing her duty. Well, look under your pillow on Christmas morning, and you will find your guidebook, replied Mrs. March. They talked over the new plan while Hannah cleared the table. Who is old Hannah? At the bottom, see how it has that little superscript 14 at the bottom? That tells you there's the definition down there. Who is Hannah? Brian? Their housekeeper. They talked over the new plan while old Hannah cleared the table. Then out came the 4 little work baskets, and the needles flew as the girls made sheets for Aunt March. It was uninteresting and boring sewing, but tonight no one grumbled. They adopted Joe's plan of dividing the long seam into 4 parts, and calling the 4 quarters Europe, Asia, Africa, and America, and in that way got on capitally, especially when they talked about the different countries as they stitched their way through them. Okay? Do you see how they're kind of making work a game? See? Have you ever done that? Have you ever had like a job that you had to get done, but you made it into a game and made it a little more enjoyable?
No.
When I was little, I remember we used to do it sometimes. At 9 o'clock, they stopped working and sang as usual before they went to bed. No one but Beth could get much music out of the old piano, but she had a way of softly touching the yellow keys and making a pleasant accompaniment to the simple songs they sang. They had done this from the time they could list. What's a list? Chloe? to speak imperfect like a child. So sometimes, like my brother's fiance, they're getting married in August. When she was little, she couldn't say her R's. So she would say Mary Kathleen Taylor. Her name was Mary Catherine Taylor, but her R's became Woods. So she was Mary Kathleen Taylor. Okay, that's an example of a lick. All right. So they sang "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star," but it came out like this: "Crinkle, crinkle, little star." Because they couldn't, they had a lick, and it had become a household custom. For the mother was a born singer. The first sound in the morning was her voice as she went about the house singing, and the last sound at night was the same cheery sound. For the girls never grew too old for that familiar lullaby. Okay, Brian?
So what is it called again? Lisp or last?
A lisp.